Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
We're going to start with a question. You may have heard it before, because this talks about the human constitution, the bodies that we have. Do you believe that you have a spirit? You do?
No, I am spirit.
Well, spirit. So that's the first thing, isn't it? Because you have heard it before. We have to realise that we are a spirit. We don't have a spirit, we are a spirit. And so that our life in this world is an expression of that spirit. And all the bodies that we have, so-called, are also expressions of that spirit. Now, when you say, I am a spirit, or I have a spirit, which is the I that's talking? Which is the I that's saying that? Is it the I that walks around the street?
Echo, the small echo.
The little I, isn't it? Yeah. So we have a slight contradiction here then, don't we? We can say, I am a spirit, but that's not the spirit talking, is it really? That's the little self talking. I'm going to start this session off properly now by reading a couple of paragraphs which will help us to see things the right way around. We need to understand that in reality there is only the self, the true self, the spiritual self. The spiritual being that experiences through temporary vehicles of consciousness known as the personality. The human constitution, composed of several bodies on the inner and physical planes, is only a way of looking at the self and its modes of expression, as it explores and works in the denser areas of matter within which it is evolving. To think of the bodies as separate things or entities is distracting at best and confusing at worst. The spiritual self, sometimes referred to in Theosophy as the monad, focuses threads of awareness into the denser planes and establishes focal points of consciousness therein, around which matter of those planes is drawn into archetypal patterns and functions. These are called bodies with different names to distinguish between the working of one from another. Yet all are simply focal points of awareness of the individual spirit or monad. So we need to look at that a little bit closer now. The idea that we are composed of different bodies is only one way of looking at it. There's other ways of looking at it. And the main thing is that what is evolving is the spirit. Incidentally, our bodies are evolving at the same time, but the purpose of this is for the spirit to evolve. And this is a very important point, because in many religious points of view, this world is a mistake. This world is somewhere we fell into shame and into sin, and that we have to get out of it because we shouldn't be here. Even the Buddhists, in their everyday exoteric religion to the masses, say we're looking to try and get off the wheel of rebirth, as though there's, that's what we have to do in this one life. Well, I put it to you that the spirit isn't coming into these lives, thousands of them, as some kind of a mistake. It's here in order for it to evolve. It's here in order to experience life in the physical world, in the astral world, the etheric world, in the mental world, and interact with the rest of creation and with the rest of humanity and the animals and the plants and the planet. And in that experience and reaction, it is actually opening up its own potentials and evolving. So we need to understand that that's what the process is. It's not a mistake. It's an incredibly marvellous system by which the spiritual sparks of the divine, actually become capable and attain their evolution into a much higher state of consciousness than that from which they start originally. So it's hard to think of the spirit as being needing to evolve. Yet it is, because everything is evolving. The planet is evolving, the stars are evolving, the Absolute itself is evolving. And I think we said this in a previous session where it was pointed out to you, Elaine, that the Absolute is evolving through you. It's not doing it somewhere else, it's doing it through us, and through the animals and the vegetables and the minerals, and all the angels and devas and the elementals. This is what evolution is. It's a whole integrated system where everything is part of and works with and feeds off and symbiotic relationship with everything else. So this idea that the spiritual self or monad extends a thread from its spiritual plane into the lower planes, this is a very important sort of image that we can get a grasp on, because as it enters the more denser planes, along this thread it establishes a centre of consciousness at different levels. And a centre of consciousness like a node, if you like. And that centre of consciousness then, on that particular plane, attracts matter of that plane to it, and other beings and elemental forces to that centre of consciousness, and that's what become what we call our other bodies. When it comes to the physical level, at the end of the thread, then that is made up by physical atoms, come together through the pairing of your parents, and are organised through the genetic code between the two parents. But that body, your body, grows within the mould of the inner bodies. You've all seen, have you seen the film Avatar? Yes? Did you see Avatar? No, Elaine, you haven't seen Avatar? Ruth, you haven't seen Avatar?
Is it sort of...
Beryl, you haven't seen Avatar?
We haven't... Yes.
Oh, you have. John says you have, right. Well, Avatar is a film where...
I saw it on the channel, but I never looked.
Never looked at it.
I don't know if I've got it.
Well, it's
was it a film?
Yes, it was on ITV, I think, about 2 weeks ago.
All right.
It was in 3D on the cinemas. David Cameron made it. He made Titanic.
All right.
Anyway, the idea of the film is that humans are on another planet, in another part of the solar system universe, where these beings live, humanoid beings live, who are really at one with their planet and nature. But that planet's got valuable mineral resources. So the humans want that, don't they? So in order to react with the natives on that planet, they, through genetic manipulation, they produce an avatar, which is another body composed of their genetics and human genetics, which can survive in that environment and looks the same as them, but the human beings occupy that body remotely from within a sort of chamber where they go to sleep. So the human gets in this chamber, cocoon, and it closes, and they go to sleep, and their consciousness is transferred to the avatar body on the planet.
All right.
You're all avatars. This is what it is. This is what this is. This isn't my avatar body. My spiritual self is asleep on the spiritual plane. It's in its own cocoon. But its consciousness, such as it is, has been transferred into this brain and this vehicle and working through these senses, with these emotions and thinking processes. So this is what we are. We're avatars in this world.
And hence the statement, I am not...
Not my body. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not my feelings. I'm not my thinking.
Yeah.
So hurry up and wake me up to understand all this.
The point is, you see, that spiritual self that's transferred its consciousness here is definitely trying to wake up here in full realization of what it is. And that takes many lives of evolution, of reincarnation, of incarnations to actually do. So each time we have a life, our spiritual self becomes that much more experienced, just like the avatar. When the avatar goes to sleep and the operator wakes up in the capsule, he knows more about that world then and how to react with those people, and he's learning through that. He can't do it through his own human body because they won't have him, and he can't survive in that environment anyway. It'd need masks and everything. So each life that we're born, when we have a physical body, we actually, by transferring our consciousness into it for the lifetime, we actually learn about this environment, and in doing so we learn about ourselves. He did the same thing, the hero of the story. He started off as part of a military exercise and ended up becoming one of them, because he learnt about himself in that process, how it was far better to connect with nature around him than to just simply rip out the minerals and ignore the indigenous population, right? So he learnt through that process, and the others who were doing the same work, they also learnt through that process. But the military, who weren't doing the avatar work, they just wanted to destroy everything.
That's cool, did you?
Yeah.
Trying to kill them.
So it's a very good analogy of what we're doing here. And you see, during that time that we're here on Earth, in our avatar body, our consciousness goes in and out. Sometimes it's very strong, sometimes it's very weak. It's very weak at night when we go to sleep. And we start to dream, don't we? Or we don't even. And so what's happened there is our real self has withdrawn its consciousness from the avatar body back into the energy body and the astral body, wherein it's not very used to actually operating as a terminal point. So the experiences it have mostly comes out as dreams. But with practice and more experience, again, it can actually become lucid in that state, like you're lucid here. You would say this state was a lucid state, because it's very real.
The astral is
But the astral state, where you dream, is not as real to you.
no.
Therefore, you're not lucid in it. You're aware, but in a dream-like state. Now, with practice, you can become aware, and sometimes you will have a dream which is so powerfully
I
strong.
know, and it becomes lucid, doesn't it?
That's right.
Because I have been in those dreams.
That's right. And it's just the same as being here then, except you're there.
Yeah.
And then with even more practice, you can step out of the dream state entirely into that world proper,
Right.
using that astral body then as your avatar body for the time that you're asleep. But you see how it requires consciousness to fade out from one focal point to focus on another. Now the purpose of the spirit's evolution at the end of all these cycles is that it should be able to, and gradually more and more, so eventually it's able to have consciousness on all those levels, just like it has consciousness here now. On its own level, which is like blissful, amazing unity with all life, and people experience that at times, and able to control and be aware of the mental plane where all the archetypal ideas are there to harvest and to use, and at the astral plane where there's incredible beauty there, and where some of the higher feelings are generated of love and care and empathy. And then at the energy level where we actually are an energy being, as well as at the physical body level where we're actually solid beings.
Would that count for... I don't dream in a lucid way. I don't even remember what I dreamed. But when I wake up, I sort of feel been having a wonderful time.
Yeah? Yes, absolutely.
and really, it was a bit of a bind to come back to
Yeah.
this reality.
Well, the reason why you feel that is because this body in this world is very heavy and very cumbersome, and it's actually very restricting, constricting. By comparison, when your consciousness terminates in the astral world, you're much lighter, much freer, the colours are more vibrant, you can fly, you're not weighed down. Right. You can communicate mind to mind with people, emotion to emotion. It's a much higher, brighter, vibrating world. But we are actually here to do business. So when we're asleep here, we can temporarily transfer our consciousness to that world. And then you see, if that's the case, when our brain shuts down, our thinking elements of our brain shut down, our senses close down, and we go to so-called sleep, and our consciousness is withdrawn into the astral world, then compare that then to when this body's no use anymore and it dies. So when it dies, what has happened here is that the spirit has withdrawn that thread completely and severed it.
Yes, that's
right? And at that point it's withdrawn into the etheric brain, the energy brain, and that only lasts for weeks, months, and then it withdraws completely into the astral world, which then instead of being a dream world becomes your real world in your after-death life. Right? So the world that you're dreaming is the world you will go to when you no longer need this, no longer can use this body and you're dead, so-called dead. Your body's dead, you're not dead. You can't die. Even your body doesn't really die. It just goes back to all the living bits that made it up.
Yes,
Right? So, apart from death being a sort of like thing we're all frightened of, get over that one because there's nothing to fear. The only thing to fear about death is leaving things undone that you should have done. That's the bit that bothers you. So get them done. Tell that person you love them. Make up the arguments you've had and the difficulties you've become. Come to terms with things before you go. Then you can enjoy that other world and assimilate the experiences of the life you just lived, and then transfer. The spirit is trying to extract the better side of that, the higher vibrations of that, into its own nature at the end of that process. And we went through that in Karma and Reincarnation a bit, didn't we? So basically, this universe is based on the number 7. We're told this by the masters and higher beings who sort of worked this out. Pythagoras worked it out actually anyway, a long time ago. It's a septenary system. But that doesn't mean to say that all universes, past or future, are going to be based on the number 7, but this one is. So that's all that needs to concern us.
7 is connected throughout.
Yes, that's right.
Lots of things.
So when you take white light and you divide it up, you get 7 colours, 3 primary and 4 harmonic colours. Then you can subdivide that and so on, so all the different hues and shades. But basically it's 7. 7 colours of the rainbow.
Yes.
The 7 notes of the octave. And so on and so on and so on. So we generally say then, as Theosophy said, we have 7 bodies. Bearing in mind though what I've just said, that they're actually only centres of consciousness, that they're just temporary vehicles, they're only expressions of the real self. Nevertheless, it's like saying you had 7 cars. Right? Well, 6 cars and you're the driver. So there's physical car, the etheric car, the astral car, 2 on the mental plane, or the mental plane, the body of love, wisdom, intuition, and then the driver himself. Right? But what I want to make point now is that 7 is only a nominal division, because really it is only the self. So you're dividing it up into 7 for convenience sake. You could say there was only 5. The spirit, the mental, the astral, the etheric, and the physical. Or you could say there was only 4: the spirit, the mental, the astral and the physical. Or you could say there's only three: the spirit, the personality and the physical. Or you could say there's only two: the spirit and the physical. It's arbitrary, isn't it? At the end of the day, there's only the self, and ways in which the self is expressing itself and experiencing in different levels. Now, the next point we need to look at is the question then of individuality. What is the difference between human beings and the rest of creation? Let's say the animal kingdom, the vegetable tree, the trees and the grasses. And
We've got free will.
we've got free will, yeah. They've got will of a kind, it's not free will. And see, animals and vegetables and minerals, they do their thing. Animals are higher in evolutionary terms than the vegetables and the minerals. And some animals are almost human. It's when they associate with humans, like pets, their intelligence expands and they can actually think more humanly. But as a general mean, animals' thinking is instinctive. It's to do with survival, food and all the rest of it. But when it's associated to the human and you starts to try to relate to you and interact with you, their minds start to expand a bit more. And so animals then can do quite astounding things. But it's not until the life waves actually reach the human kingdom that they become individualized. And that means self-consciously aware. You see, and a self-consciously aware being, the difference is it can question what it is. Like we're doing now.
And animals can do that, can they?
No, animals can't.
I thought you said...
Sorry. Only a
My fault.
self-consciously aware being, i.e. human and above,
Yes, that's right.
can actually question their own existence.
I got you.
And so Descartes said, thinking about it, he said, well, hang on, I think, therefore I am. In other words, I do exist. Because humans can even pose the question, do I really exist? And if I do, what is it I am? But animals just get on with living, don't they?
Yeah.
You don't start philosophising. You'll see a lot of sheep sat in the field, cutting away, going, what are we? And I think we're rubbish. It's obviously we just wool factories.
But they will get there.
They will get there, yeah. And so when we reach the human kingdom, after eons upon eons upon eons of evolution through all the lower kingdoms and the inner worlds and all that, we finally come to this point in the scheme of things where we can actually create a human kingdom to live in as human beings, as individually self-aware beings. We then have a much more complete mental vehicle, because the higher aspects of the mind are actually vivified by the now I'm getting into all sorts of realms here. That which gives us our life journey at this point, and some would call it God, some would call it the Logos, some would call it the Upper Trinity. But at this point, this extra factor comes in, which vivifies higher mind and brings this individual awareness to bear. Now, higher mind is the secret to human evolution, really, because it's the creative side of mind. The lower side of the mind only deals with logical facts and figures. It deals with things. So when you go home, it's your lower mind that knows how to get home. But your higher mind doesn't deal in those kind of things, facts and figures. It deals with creative ideas, with abstract thought, abstract form which you can't put into concrete words. But that's where inspiration comes from. Comes through higher mind. So all artists, all deep thinkers, philosophers, poets, writers,
Inventors.
theoretical scientists, inventors, geniuses, composers, they're getting that from higher mind.
Right.
Right? So
It makes sense though, doesn't it?
it makes sense, yeah. Because it's more than just the mind that knows how to brew a cup of tea, isn't it? This is something, if you ask a composer, and loads have been asked, where do you get your music from? They'll say, well, I don't really know, it just comes into my head. You know, they have ways of putting themselves in a receptive state by going for a walk or having 16 cups of tea or whatever they do, but it just comes into their head. They hear a melody, they hear other instruments. Yeah? And it's coming in from the abstract levels of mind. And this is also where we get inspired with inventions. You know, we didn't sort of suddenly work out how to make fire. It was passed down to us through higher mind. And then we've all had it, haven't we, that moment where you say, I've got it, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eureka moment. The Eureka moment.
Eureka moment, yeah. When what's his name saw the apple fall? Newton, yeah. Don't know where it landed on his head, but anyway. Now, the difference between the two modes of operation of the mind, the reason why we say higher and lower is really because of the orientation. Because lower mind is more or less concerned with the physical world and survival, and it's wrapped up in the emotions, the astral body. So you could say, if that was mind, then the lower mind is actually looking down into the astral world and the physical world. It's dealing with the senses. Whereas the higher mind, it's turned the other way, towards the spiritual self.
Yeah.
And so that's why we say this two higher and lower mind. It's only one mind really, but because the higher portion of it is actually orientated towards the spiritual self. And that's why it gets the inspiration. Inspiration means it's knowledge from within, inspired. So, in Theosophical terms, and these are only terms, these are Sanskrit terms, we say the spirit is Atma, and below that is the vehicle of spirit, which is Buddhi. We call that the body of inspiration or the love wisdom aspect. And then higher mind or higher manas. So we say that the spirit is a triple being, Atma, Buddhi, Manas. And the personality is a fourfold being, Manas, emotions, energy body and physical body, or personality, persona. Persona is Greek for mask. It means a mask, something we're wearing, an avatar. Atma, spirit, we equate with being. Buddhi, we equate with doing. And mind, we equate with knowing. Any questions at this stage?
Do we have that all written down in those tables?
Yeah, so you'll see in the books,
It's just
you'll see
remembering
tables of
everything.
these, won't you?
Yeah.
But you'll see that they don't necessarily agree with each other either.
That's right. That's what's so confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing, isn't it? And some of these tables include a thing called prana, as though that's another body. It isn't another body. It's energy. It's life force, chi, and it's obviously in the human constitution, but it isn't a vehicle. And some people put it at the level of the higher astral. Some people put it at the level of the higher physical. Doesn't really matter, does it? It's not a body. But if you put prana into the sevenfold system, then something has to give. So one of the other six has to be blended into two, into one. So another thing that we need to consider is that all these vehicles, all these bodies, all these senses of consciousness, including the physical, are all made up of living beings. Nothing is dead. Everything is alive. Right? So this is why, for instance, your thoughts are things. And your feelings are things. Right? All the matter of all the planes is alive. All the matter in your body is alive. So they're conscious at their own level. They're not conscious like we are, but they're still conscious at their own level.
I remember Sam West saying to me donkeys years ago, "Oh yeah, I'm a god."
I'm a god.
You're a what? He said, "Oh yeah," he said, "see all those little microbes and that, and my fingernails and that. I'm no god." And I understood what he meant.
What he meant was, all the lives that make up his body,
He's their god.
he's a supreme consciousness over all those lives, isn't he? He decides where it goes, what it eats, when it sleeps and when it wakes and so forth.
Like where the microbes under the fingernails of the Logos.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is so.
And of course, you see, the thing is that the atoms and molecules and cells that make up your body have themselves evolved to be able to respond in the cooperative sense that makes up your body. You can't just pick up dust from the street and make a body out of it. It takes eons of evolution for atoms and molecules to actually be able to respond, to work together as any organism, from an earthworm to a human being.
You see, I think I can communicate with the beings that make up my body.
Right.
Just as the dog at home responds
Okay.
to living with the humans.
Yes.
I have a feeling that all the atoms and molecules of my body, I can be in touch with. I really have a connection with them and a controlling. For instance, I ask them every day, and you laugh at this, to vibrate in perfect harmony with the universe. That we will do that.
Mm.
And I think that happens.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it's happening.
I certainly wasn't vibrating in harmony with when I was trying to understand some of it. I had to get my head around it, but
Well, see what
it's getting better.
What Greta's saying is that, she feels that there may be, she's aware of a conscious connection to all the beings that make up her body.
I think that's good. Wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling really healthy and vibrant, that's what you feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is why people run. They go out for running and do exercise because they feel so in tune with their bodies when they do it. I know when I used to go mountain climbing and rock climbing, it was tiring, but you feel so much. You feel the life within you.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Dancers say the same thing, don't
Well,
they?
I do that when I go dancing.
I used to
feel
when I
that.
We're dancing,
I
yeah.
used to go to the gym.
Yeah. So what's happening there is, because you're putting your consciousness into physical activity, which the body likes, you get a feedback from it.
You do.
And in that feedback, you're becoming consciously aware of the lives, which is what Greta's saying. And Greta is doing an exercise every morning where she's asking her lives within her body to be harmonic with the universe. Why not?
I think
It's a
that's
nice thing
great.
to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you see, when you take it to the other, I mean, obviously, if Greta's feeling that, then she's developed that ability to become aware to some degree. Then at the other end of the scale, at the top end of the scale, you've got yogis who are so in contact with their bodily lives and atoms and molecules that they can do amazing things with them. even suspend life entirely, as it were, and be pronounced dead and then wake up again.
Yeah.
So, but then you see, this is the role of evolution, that our spiritual self should be in control, totally in control of all its vehicles. Just like as a driver, you want to be in control of your car,
That's
don't you?
right.
Well, I think most of humanity are like learners at the moment. They're driving, but they're all over the road. And they do lots of banging into each other, don't they? But with more skill and more evolution, we shall all drive harmoniously from one place to another.
That's right. Right, that was very enlightening. Thank you.
Well,
Don't
thanks
take
for
my-
that,
Don't
Greta.
take my word.
No, I think it's a good
No, I
point.
shall be more aware of it, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
because I think a lot of us are ignorant to things like that.
yeah. And I mean, apart from the actual physical molecules and atoms in your body, which are living beings in their own right, there are elemental beings that are working your immune system and your digestion and your heart and all that. And this again is what the yogis can actually control those elemental beings by being in harmony with them. And all sorts of things is possible then. But for the purposes of our just living day to day, we don't need to have that level of control.
No.
But eventually we will have it anyway, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
It's a bit like being psychic, right? Some people strive to be psychic. Other people are born because they've strived in the past, and they are psychic. And that's not necessarily what they thought it would be when they get it. But eventually we all will be psychic, because it only means we're conscious at the psychic level. Yeah? So I think we've covered most of what we wanted to do. If we just have a look at a few summing up points then now. So how many bodies do we think make up the human constitution?
7 or 5, you said. Or
7. Yeah.
7.
7, yeah. But we must bear in mind that there are expressions of the one self, the higher self. They're not us. They're vehicles that we're using. Bear in mind, of course, that as you use these bodies, you are expressing your own nature by the way you use them, aren't you? So, in that sense, you know, your physical body may not be you, but it's what you are doing right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another question that comes up at this point is, where does mind actually come from? What is human mind? Has it got it? Oh, you want to say? Go on.
No, I don't.
No, you've
I
obviously
hear you
picked up.
saying it in the previous
Yeah.
lecture.
So you have no hesitation in understanding where mind comes from. I could just equally say, where do emotions come from, and where does the physical body come from? Because the principle's the same. We take the human body, we can see it very clearly. Our human body is this world, isn't it? It isn't something else.
Yeah.
It's bone, blood, sinew, tissue, molecules, atoms of this world. Right? They're formed into this form and it walks about, but it still is this world. And similarly, our emotional body equally is part of a greater emotional world. Again, it isn't an isolated thing. It's in its own element, and what we have is our gathered bit of it. So you could say then that, like, if emotions was a pond of water, our bit is a cup that's immersed in the water. It's not been brought out of the water, but the cup holds the bit of water that is our emotions, but still within the emotional element itself. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yes.
Our body is the world. Our emotions are part of the emotional world. Our mind is part of universal mind. That's what you wanted to say, Greta, isn't it?
I didn't. I just remember you saying it, and it struck me.
It's obviously stuck, yeah.
Absolutely.
See, because this is where we have to sort of wake up as human beings. This is our chance to wake up, really, in separating our mistaken view, separatist view, that we are isolated from everything else, that we are something different from everything else.
But we're not.
We're not really, no. Do you think we think of our minds as our mind? This is my mind. This. Actually, it's only part of the universal mind. The bit I'm using, that's like saying the bit that your car stood on is your road. Well, yeah, but take away the rest of the road, and what would you be stood on then? You'd be hanging in space, wouldn't you? So this is where we have to adjust our thinking. We are operating in these planes, and we're not outside of the reality of those planes. We're just using temporarily parts of it to express and to experience. Those are the key words. We're expressing through those areas of being, and we're experiencing back through them as well. So the mental level, all our thoughts in the mental world, along with everybody else's thoughts, make up a big sea of thought, doesn't it? And we're getting the feedback of that from other people, and we're contributing to that. And similarly, at our emotional level, our feeling is not isolated from everybody else. At the physical level, we think we're separate, but we're actually not. Not in reality. And the purpose of the spirit's evolution is to evolve itself. The purpose of this life after life that we live is for our spiritual selves to evolve. We have to grasp that point. It's not a diversion, it's not a slip from grace. It's what we have to do in order to unlock these incredible potentials that the Spirit has, which are mirrors of the Absolute itself. Just in the same way that our mind, being an aspect of universal mind, is capable in the fullness of time of expanding to that level. So is our spirit capable of expanding evolutionary to the level of the Absolute. Although we're talking a distant future, aren't we? Alright, well I think I've covered everything we wanted to cover. Unless there are any questions, we can go into other aspects. I know that there are other things to do with the human constitution, like chakras and things like that, but because we're shadowing the diploma course, this isn't the diploma course, but it's the same subjects that the students are doing, we're trying to keep at the elementary level, we're trying to keep at the level of principles rather than depth and details. So yes, we could talk about chakras, we could talk about lots of these things in much more detail, but that isn't the purpose of these talks. But any questions you'd like to raise, we can have a look at them. How are we doing for time, John? We're right, are we? So any last questions before we close? No?
I'm so grateful, Eric.
That's not a question. It's a statement of fact. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.